and it's taken the 15 to 18 year data set, girls data set in particular, compared it with 11 to 14 year girls, and compared it with 15 to 18 year boys, just to see what the differences are. So it's far more detail, and too much detail to give to you now, but it is, in fact, our research team doesn't even know that I've photocopied it for you, but there's about 25 copies, but I just picked one up later in the day, or after the session anyway. But let's fire through some stuff. I really want you to spend some of this time in sharing what you do and what you know, and Clive talked about that this morning, so and Cooper, that there's no point in people standing up pretending they're experts in these things, particularly when, as I say, when it comes to girls. You have all the answers, I guess, if you like, in the room, and there are no right answers. So anyway, I thought we'd talk about the research. What else do we know? Just some of the motivations and barriers. Again, for those of you that have heard me speak at previous conferences, we spend a lot of money researching the motivations and barriers to sport and participation every year. It tells us the same things. It's been saying the same things for 15 years. We don't actually do anything with all of that information, and we're certainly keen with the Young People Survey to make sure that we use what we know in it, plus all of the other research, and we actually customise the way we are offering sport to young people. So in this case, it's 15 to 18 year girls. And I'll start with this. This is our strategic aim. When you get research, if you're going to use research well, then you should be really using it to try and answer a question. And in our case, we have a strategic outcome that we're looking to achieve, and it is that one. It's increasing participation. And at the moment, our target is 90% of school-aged kids taking part in 3 or more hours a week of informal or organised sport. So those of you that have been following Sport New Zealand, Spark, over the years will know that that's quite different than what it used to be. It used to be 80% of school-aged kids participating in organised sport for 3 or more hours a week. So we did the survey and found that we were nowhere near that mark. So we changed the target, which is a really good way of using research, change your strategic outcomes. It's now 90% of school-aged kids, 3 or more hours a week of both informal and or organised sport. But we have kept an eye on the separate areas. So we're talking really around informal sport. We had some fascinating conversations this morning around what informal sport is and what it isn't. But we need to be careful that we're clear about that before we can measure this. Anyway, this is the first part of the Young People Survey that I was interested in. This is the time spent in organised sport by girls. And the researchers would say, look, you can't do that because I've shown it by year and the sample size is too small, but I found a nice data set that does that for me, and it looks a lot better than just 3 age groups, which is what we tend to look at. We tend to look at 5 to 10 or 7 to 10 years, and we look at 11 to 14, and then we look at 15 to 18. In fact, a 15 to 16 year old is wildly different from a 12 year old, as we know. What this shows is that this is spending no time in organised sport at all. So you can see from years probably 8 year girls to 10 year girls, the least amount of no time, and in other words the most time in organised sport, but that climbs from the time girls get to about 11, and the amount of time, the no time that they spend in organised sport increases. Does that make sense? The time in mucking around, and we've called mucking around as the informal sport, so it's an unfortunate term, and it came about again well defined in the Young People Survey because if you go to a 6 or 7 year old and you ask them how much time you spend in informal sport, and you get a completely blank look. It was tested pretty well. Mucking around was pretty much mucking around with friends. It was seen as participant-led, reasonably well understood. So the time spent mucking around also increases from the time girls are about 12. This is no time spent mucking around, but it's a lower percentage. The time spent in 3 hours or more, so remember this is our target in organised sport, again, peaks at 45%, which is quite good in that 11 to 14 year old age group, but then takes a dive as girls get older, and the older they get, the less time they spend. So same in mucking around, but there's just not that same peak. And then there's the third category is between 0 and 3 hours. So we've got spending no time, spending up to 3 hours, and spending over 3 hours are the categories. But again, you can see as girls get older, the amount of time they spend in organised sport, and mucking around decreases. Well, in this case, actually, in mucking around, that 0 to 3 hours increases, which is useful for us. So this is a bit confusing. But if you look at the older age girls, 15 to 18, 45% of them are spending no time involved in organised sport. That's 0 time per week in the past week. Just under 30% and about 25% are spending between 0 and 3 hours involved in sport. So you could add those together, which will obviously be about 55%. But if we look at mucking around, same thing. So that blue line across the bottom, as the girls get older, that's spending no time in the last week involved mucking around. The number of girls spending 3 hours or more is diving, and the number of girls spending between 0 and 3 hours is staying about the same. When I looked at that, came back to this and thought, right, well, we've got a number of measures in here. One is the number of girls, or number of school-age kids. One is the amount of time they're doing. One is organised and or informal sport. There's a lot of things that we have the opportunity to tweak. So if we're trying to make an impact on a strategic outcome, then we can do a number of different things. If you look at the numbers around girls 15 to 18, that's what the current picture is. So even though we reset our strategic outcomes after we got the young people survey, 15 to 18 year girls is miles away from that. 73% involved in 3 or more hours a week, and 42 to 43 doing organised sport. Now, this isn't causal, it doesn't say why, it's just an observation that that's in fact the pattern. We compare that with girls 11 to 14, and 11 to 14 generally in the young people survey is the highest participation group. The most activities, the most time, the most volunteering, all of the characteristics, if you like, of that group are the highest, and it's probably the highest throughout life, I would imagine, that cohort. But over 90%, so that's that's above our target. It's a little bit lower than we would like in terms of organised and informal sport, but still, the 11 to 14-year-old age group is looking reasonably healthy. So, the opportunity is 30% of 15 to 18-year girls spend no time in organised sport, and 10% of 15 to 18-year girls spend no time mucking around. I won't spend much time on this. This is the number of activities. Just again, that pattern, girls 11 to 13 participate in fewer activities. So we're comparing them with girls 7 to 10, which is 11 to 14, 15 to 18 pretty much. But if you compare those, it's twice as many girls participating in 21 or more activities. Same here, more younger girls are participating in 16 to 20. Starts to get closer around this. And far more of the older girls are participating in between 1 and 10 activities. And in fact, almost four times are spending not involved in any activities. So I won't spend too much time on that. So again, when we're looking at the data, the YPS data, to try and figure out where our opportunity is, this is the ranked list of girls 15 to 18 years involvement. And we asked them a question: have you participated in this sport this year? And it's always tricky because it doesn't talk about frequency, but if you're going to ask a question in winter, then you've got to ask, have you participated in it this year? Otherwise, you're just going to capture the winter sports. That's in order though. So 78% of girls 15 to 18 said they've been involved in running, jogging, swimming, walking for fitness. It's actually no sport. That's a health, fitness aspect. And so the top 3 activities for that age group are very focused on those: cycling, biking, even. The sports, athletics, track and field. Again, some concerns around that, compulsory athletics. But netball's clearly the first sport. The symbols on the right-hand side, the blue ones, that's a comparison with boys aged 15 to 18, and the pink ones are the comparison with the girls aged 11 to 14. So, in all the girls' cases, then this is the numbers of girls in the 15 to 18-year-old age group participating in those codes is less than the 11 to 14. And obviously, more girls are participating in netball and dance, and swimming and walking for fitness, interestingly. So not a lot of solid sport in those top 10. And we ask of those sports that you participated in this year, which sports do you do weekly? And walking for fitness jumps to the top. Running, jogging again. So at least netball's up there. Swimming's still there, largely probably as a recreational rather than a competitive activity. You can see games are important, so it's Foursquare. A lot of the research, if you look at the young people survey, it excludes games. And we're starting to talk about informal sport and opportunities for kids to be involved in the less organised area, then I would put games back in. I think some of the data is quite interesting. If you look at that figure, 68% of girls 15 to 18 have been involved, been involved in games this year, and 15% of them are participating regularly in the last week, which is more than swimming, more than football and volleyball. So that first piece of information gave us a snapshot of what girls are doing. We also asked in the young people survey, what would you like to try or do more of? Which is a dreadful question for a researcher to ask, because are you asking girls that you want to try a sport, or asking girls that are currently doing a sport you want to do more of the sport? So about between 20 and 30% of girls that answered this question were answering the question, I want to try something I haven't done. And about 60 to 70% were answering the question, well, I want to do more of what I've already done. Unfortunately, can't tell you what that is. Anyway.